All right. Welcome to my stream. Let's get this started. Hello. So, this is going to be a informative kind of basics of ZBrush stream. So, if you are joining me and want to learn a little bit about ZBrush, just be sure to kind of follow along, and I can show you like the really basic things in ZBrush to kind of understand what the program does and where stuff is. Because I will say that when I got this program, a lot of things didn't make a ton of sense. So I'm grateful that YouTube was around. So a lot of this I learned through YouTube. So ready to absorb information. Good. Okay. So give me one sec here, as I am trying to have this open and I can see the chat as well. Cool. Okay. So real basics. Let's say we open up the program. Usually we don't have a sphere or anything. I just opened up a sphere because that's usually what I do. So you have you have two buttons here on the top. You have home page, which if you click on it, it just opens up the homepage section. And this kind of gives you the information of what is going on with ZBrush. There is a new one, the 1.1.1. I haven't gotten this just yet. I'm still running like the regular, I guess, 0.01. So that's that box. It's always there. To me, I think it's kind of a pointless button. I never use it. I think I press it by accident more than anything. And then there is Lightbox. This is the one that is important. So you have your home page. Go ahead and ignore it. Don't really touch it. And then you have Lightbox. So when we click on Lightbox, this is where you can find your files, your recents. So like if I click on my recents, you can see what I've been working on recently. And you can work on projects. You can go through a bunch of stuff in here. So you can see tools. There's all sorts of good stuff in here. So I'm running ZBrush 2020, the full version. I know that there are some limited things in the core version, so this one relates to the 2020 full version. So there might be some things that you might not see right away on yours, just because they're not like the full version. There are some limitations between versions. So of course I can keep clicking stuff here, like there's textures, there's alpha maps, there's materials. Usually what I worry about is my recents, if I'm going to continue working with something, or I'm going to open up a project file. So let's say there wasn't anything on the screen, you just opened up your ZBrush, it's going to be empty, and you would just open something. So like let's say we got this guy, we double click it, and then there's this guy, and you're like, all right, I want to start with a new sphere. Then you go to Lightbox, and then usually I go to open file, which is the first one, or projects. You can either open a file if you have something that you want to work with that you already started, or you do project. Project is usually the one that has the spheres, all these things that you can see over here. You have mini projects that are already made for you, like this guy head, or a dog, or anything like that. But I usually start off with a sphere. So I just double click on a sphere. It'll ask you if you want to save your file. Of course, it's up to you. If you're working on this guy, you can save him, but we're not going to save him. Okay. Let's get this. Give me 1 second here. I guess my internet is being faulty again, so I do apologize if there are some things that are acting up. Okay. So when you have the sphere over here, usually it doesn't show up with these little hash lines. It'll show up like this. So there's your sphere. So it usually shows up in this gray, this pretty gray. Oh, and let me turn this off. So you can change this to any color. If you want to change this to another color, you have a couple of things here on the side. On your left side, you have your brushes or your tool, and the type of stroke that it does. I don't usually ever change this, so you don't have to worry about this right away. You're not going to worry about alphas or anything like that right away either when you're doing basics. So ignore this for now and ignore the texture as well. You're going to go to the material. So right now, if I hover over the material, it's going to say matte cap gray. And as you can see, it's gray. So that's pretty easy. So all we've done right now has been gone to Lightbox, opened up a project, got Dynamesh Sphere, which is usually what I use for every single project that I'm going to start with. And that's what you should start with anyways when you're starting to mess around with this program. And sculpt with a sphere. It's great. And then you're going to go to the material. So you're going to click on it. And if you want this to close again, you can click on Lightbox. It'll close again. And then you can click on material. And then there's a ton of materials. So let's get creative and pick gold. So there's your gold sphere. I usually don't work with super shiny materials like this just because, I mean, it's hard to see details. So I tend to work with matte cap red wax. So you'll usually see me work with a reddish color. This is really easy on my eyes. A lot of people use the gray. It's up to you what you want to do with this. So that's how you change the color of your material. So you can do, let's do another weird one so you can see. See, there you go. Reflective. So let's go back to one that I can see and just click on it. And there you go. So there's this red one. So this whole area here is your work area. So you can see you have your material right here. And then you have this little guy up here. So Zbrush 2019 did not have this little guy, and they added him in 2020, and this has made just looking at different views extremely easy. It's going to be a little hard to show here when I don't have something to show that it's a front or a side, so I'm actually going to go ahead and open that guy. Oops, I accidentally pressed home page, which is just, I just think it's a dumb button. Lightbox, let's open this guy again so you can see. We'll go back to the sphere in a minute. So this guy, you can tell he is facing forward, right? So here he is. And then the guy up here in the corner on the right shows that he's facing forward. So this is your camera angle. This way you know where you are facing, where your camera is looking. So let's say you want him to face this way. You can press this little red bar and he faces that way immediately. So instead of you having to grab the mouse, click on it, and then move the mouse around while you're holding the mouse button in to rotate, as you can see, the little guy up here is moving when you're doing this because the camera is moving. But to do this movement, I'm using a mouse. I'm currently not using my tablet. I'm using my mouse, and I'm clicking down with the left button, holding it, and then just moving it around. And that's how you can move your camera around your model. So he's kind of tilted, kind of weird, cockeyed, and I can't seem to, you know, tilt him up, and I'm messing around. Like, let's say, like I have him like this, and I'm like, man, like, why is he so twisted? I just want to frame him better. So you can see that there's the top of the head. So I can just, you know, hit the side so he immediately snaps to the side view. This helps a lot. I kept on having a lot of issues with my camera for the longest time. I don't know where my guy was facing, and it was just an utter mess. They added this, and it just makes things a lot easier. So for me, it was easier. I think for a lot of people, it's easier. So sometimes he's kind of facing like, all right, he's over there, but let's make him face forward. See? And I press the middle button, it kind of centers him. And let's move this away. So let's say he's over there, and you're like, oh, I just want to move in closer to him faster. you can frame him. And if you hit frame, it just kind of fills your whole screen with him in the frame, which helps. So again, this little guy is your camera. If you click down on the button and you hover over this little man head for your camera view, it snaps to each view. That's why it does that weird jerking around. I'm doing this on purpose. But if you do not hover above this little guy and just do it here on the side, it just does the smooth flow. So that to me has helped a lot. And that's a good thing to know. So we know that this is to control your camera view. This is to control your material color. So we could make him red. So you can have a red guy. And Lightbox is to open your projects. So see, open project right there. And then you can grab that same guy because he's a generic guy. And then there is a sphere. Apologies if this is a more advanced question regarding to the icon on the top right and the silhouette on the top left corner. You mentioned these were features in 2020 version when updating from 2019. Yes. So let's close this. So right is this little guy, which of course added the camera view. And then there is the silhouette, which is actually, I think the silhouette's pretty cool. 2020, did you notice any reset in custom settings and layout? I didn't notice anything that different, but I also didn't change a ton of stuff in my 2019. I was running everything pretty basic. So personally, I didn't see a huge change. I think the biggest change for me that I saw for what I used was this silhouette showed up and the camera control was less messy. I think it's just, it got more organized. So to me, those are the two biggest changes. And now that I'm addicted to like the camera view, for me, it was well worth the upgrade. But I was also, you know, paying the monthly fee. So it upgrades by itself pretty much. So the silhouette, which is right here, I can make it bigger if you want. So with artwork, silhouette is very important. If you can tell what a character is based on the silhouette, then you are pretty much doing a good job with the design. So if the silhouette looks great, and like let's say you're trying to make a dog, trying to make whatever, a duck, if the silhouette portrays it without you having to look at minor details, then you've actually, you know, you've done a good job. You have a really good model on your hands. So as you can see, I can tell this is a human bust even from the silhouette right here. And see, you can see it from the side. This looks like a human bust. So this is a good model, in my opinion. This, you can make it as small or as large as you want. This is more for just, it's to help you. You don't really need to do anything with this. So I usually make it pretty small like that. That's up to you how much real estate you want it to take. So now we are going to go to this side over here. So usually I only really use fit to frame, move, zoom 3D, rotate, and line fill for the poly frame. So the poly frame, start here on the bottom, click on it, and it creates all these little lines. So this is the topology of your model. So you can see this one's extremely clean because this is a professionally done model. But you can see how the topology is on this character. And it changes the color slightly, but that's just for you to see things. In here you can see that the eyes and the teeth are different colors. That means they're in different layers, and I can already see that, and I'll explain that a little bit over here. So let's turn this off. So you can turn on, off. So next to everything that I hover, there is a quick key. So this one is Shift F. We'll turn that on or off. Or you can just hover your mouse button over it. And then these, you actually physically have to put your mouse over it. So I want to zoom in and out of this model. You hover your mouse over here, and then you can move it. This is the part that got me. Like, I thought, okay, I click on it and then I'm going to be able to move in and out. No, I didn't realize that you have to kind of click on this and hover over it to make it work. You can zoom in the same way by clicking on it with your mouse button or your tablet. I usually do this part with the mouse, and then you hover. Rotate, even though with the mouse you can rotate from here, you can also do it from here if you want to. The rotate one is like the generic click down on your mouse away from the model, and you can click it and rotate it. Again, the frame will zoom in, fill the whole area, and put it in frame. However you've snapped it, like so, it'll stay in frame right there. But remember, if you want him to face forward, click on that, and then you can click frame, and he'll fit the frame. So this is just to kind of help you have the model where you want it to be. Because a lot of the time, when you're learning this program, you're going to be twisting this model, and stuff's going to be everywhere. And it's going to be a little confusing at first, or a little, I guess, can be vomit inducing. So I will give that as a warning. You can get VR sickness from doing this. If you do, just take a break. It took me a little while to get used to it when I started doing 3D a while back, especially from your eyes looking at something, twisting it around and whatnot. It takes a little bit of getting used to, because you can't get dizzy doing this. So that's normal. But that is the really basics on how to control your camera view and how to change your material color. Look how nice it looks in gold. So let's make him back to matte red. So when we were looking at him and we had clicked on the line fill here, so you can see all the little lines, you can see that the eyes were red right there, and the teeth. You can kind of see. Let's zoom in. Come over here to the right under Zoom 3D. Zoom in and move. See? And that's how you can move around. Move, move, move. Zoom, zoom, zoom. He's got red teeth in there. And then he's got, let's move, zoom out. And you can see he's got red eyes too. That means they're on a different layer. Let's frame him. So because let's say we zoomed in a little too much. Let's frame him. And then he zooms out. And then over here, you have a lot of information. So usually when you're playing with something and you open something up, the subtool tends to be open. So the subtool is important. It is your layers. So if you know how to work with art programs, this is going to make a lot of sense. If you don't work with art programs, then you're going to have to learn. This is very much like an art program because that's how Zbrush treats this. Zbrush takes the approach of treating this like working with real clay in a lot of ways, but if you know how Photoshop works, Clip Studio, Sai, anything like that, and you know about layers, then this will make a lot more sense. If you don't know about layers, you're going to really like layers. So the demo head is right here, which that guy's called the demo head, which is just a scan of the outside. And then he's got eyes and teeth. So when he was designed, his eyes and teeth were done on a separate layer. Then you have little eyes up here, and then you can make them disappear. So the little eyes will turn stuff on and off. Sometimes when it's like the parent, like the main one, it will not let you erase it. Sometimes you have to make it as a secondary one to be able to erase it. I mean, hide it. So Zbrush does have kind of like little rules depending on where your models are. But with the eyes, you can at least make them, disappear, reappear. So you can work on things. Like let's say you wanted to work on his eyelids, but you think the eyes are going to get in the way when you work on it. You just turn them off, and then you can, keep sculpting and working on the eyes, because you can tell here that his eyes it was just kind of like pushed in. It was indented in, and then they just added the extra spheres afterwards. So let's pop them back in. So that is your subtool. It is your layers. You can create new layers. You can insert things. You can do all sorts of stuff. So right now I have a visible count of 4. You can make this bigger. 5, 6, 7. See. So more things start showing up. If your model starts to get a little busy, I usually keep them like around 5 or 4. Then you can start adding more layers, like visible count layers. But you can also use this, and you can go back and forth and see how many are in there. So let's say this man wanted an extra sphere added to him. So let's add, or let's say he just wants a shape. You want to insert something. So let's say you wanted to give him a halo. So let's insert. So as you can see, here's your subtool. You go insert, and then it gives you options, right? So you can insert a sphere, a cube, a cylinder, cone, ring. So you see all the stuff that's in there. There's one called dog. So let's see, insert, and then let's give him a ring. Everything is going to show up in the middle. And as you can see, that is gigantic and right in the middle of our model. But this is neat. So what we can do is resize this halo, because we don't want this thing to be stuck in the middle of this guy. Oh, see, I can make him disappear, which is the eyes. Okay. So we want to grab this halo and put it above his head, right? And we just inserted that. So we went into insert, and then we inserted a ring 3D. I'm not going to click it again because it'll, add another one. And it created a new layer. So this is something I recommend from the beginning. Please do this, so this way you do not get confused. Go and click on it. See how it has like a kind of like a little white square? And then you're going to rename it. And let's name it Halo. Or whatever you want, or you could just name it Ring or anything. So we change the name, and now we know that if we click on that, we're clicking on this halo. But we don't want it in the middle of his face. We want to move it. So this is where we start going into the tool section. So we're going to go back to the left. So the left was where we had the brush, the strokes, the alpha, all these. But we're only going to worry about the top, where your brushes live. Because the only thing you want to worry about here right away would just be the material, and that's just for you to change the colors. I change the chalk, change it to red. So this part is just for you. You can make it any color you want. So we're going to go to brushes. So we're going to go in here. There are a lot of brushes. So a lot of these you really won't touch right away, but if you go through them, they're actually pretty cool. If you can spend some time looking at what these brushes do, they're really interesting, extremely interesting, because ZBrush has made it so you spend less time making like little things, and there's already brushes that provide whatever you're trying to make. There is a brush that makes zippers. So see the type of zippers, a metal zipper or a plastic zipper. See, these are brushes that are just odd. There's a brush that is just called parts. So let's say we click on this one. You can make a torso, a female torso, eyes, different eyes, ears and heads and mouths and everything. You can, and then if you grab this, you can kind of scroll. Actually, this one, never mind, up here, sorry. This one's for your history. So you can scroll up here. I could even give him a dog head if I wanted. This is just a brush, and brushes work differently, but I'm not going to click on that just yet. So we want to move the halo and we want to resize it. Which of all these brushes do you think would work if you were to take a guess? I would use either a Transpose or a Transpose Smart. They're both fine. So let's say we start with a Transpose. Transposing something is to move something, right? So this shows you, you're going to move it Y, or you're going to move it X. So the Y is going to go up and down. See? Y, it'll show you. Or the X is going to move left and right. And then, of course, there is the blue one, because this is 3D space, which is Z, and that's going to go this way. Because just think of a box, pretty much. He moves around in a box. And then we can frame him again, if you want. We can center him again. Let's say we want to zoom out. And then move ourselves, let's say, right there. So now that we have this here, we're going to grab the top green one with your mouse button. You're going to click, and you're going to drag it. Drag, 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 drag. You drag it wherever you want. So let's say we want this guy's halo right there. But then we realize, man, that's a big halo. We want to resize this halo so it's easier. So do you want to make it thinner? Do you want to make it like wider or not as wide or a completely different shape? Or do you want to resize the whole thing at once and keep pretty much like the same thickness, the same shape and everything? That's where we go to this yellow box. It scales X, Y, and Z together. So we're going to grab the box, we're going to click on it, and then we're going to scroll outwards to make it smaller with your mouse. So we're going to go like that. And then we can continue doing it. Let's say we want one that big. And let's say we want it a little bit closer to his head. 1 second. Okay. So we can check, be like, okay, this guy's halo is pretty cool, but you think it's too, too straight. So let's make sure. I want to see the front of him again. So I can click on that again. That'll show me the back. That'll show me the front. You're like, well, I kind of want to tilt it a little bit so it's tilted back a bit. So the transpose is for up and down, left and right, you move stuff around, but it's also for tilting. So you see that line, and you see this line, and then you see this line. So it rotates like a sphere. So let's move it here. We grab it from here and then we start to rotate. And now he's got a pretty cool halo. And then we can move it back. And it just kind of chills on the back of his head. And let's say we want the halo larger again. We can go back to the yellow and then we can make it bigger. But we realize that, this halo is kind of thick. So we can grab this box right there, and that's going to just scale the up and down. And now it squishes it all around. But we don't want it to look like a pancake on the top like that. We want it to be thinner in here as well. So we're going to grab the blue, or make it a little bit smaller. A little bit thinner there. So you can kind of mess with it a bit here and there and just kind of make the halo how you want it to look. But that's like the basics of the Transpose tool. And this is in another layer, so if we click on the tooth layer, the Transpose tool is going to move to the tooth layer where the eyes are. So if I wanted to move those eyes, we're like, oh, whatever, we want the eyes up here instead of in his face. We can just keep them right there. If not, we can just, alright, we'll just give him back his eyes. Right there. So whenever you jump around layers, it will use the same tool until you change it, and then it will move whatever you want it to move in that layer. And every layer, depending on the one that you're using, it will always be brighter, and the other ones will always be darker when you're not using them. So teeth will be, teeth and eyes will be brighter because I clicked on them. Halo will be brighter because I clicked on it. So there is a little yellow line up here. It's your history. So history is important. So let's say you really messed up and you want to go a couple of steps back. You can literally drag this back. See how the halo is changing? Go back, go back, go back, go back, go back, go back. Okay, I want to stay there. Then you can continue doing work from here. If you start doing work from here, it's going to completely override the other history that you did all the way up to here. It's good to have this history, but it also means that it's a lot of information that you are constantly adding to the computer. So just be careful, because if you're running this on an older computer, it can, I guess, fail on you. So I'm running this on a gaming computer, so I have quite a bit of RAM to work with, but it's just one of those things to keep in mind. You don't want to go crazy with the details right off the bat, because it can bog down your computer. So we're going to go all the way to the end, because I liked where it was before. And there's this handy dandy button called the quick save right there. So we're going to go ahead and hit quick save, and it's going to create a file for me. It just did quick save. It says it saved it in 0.384 seconds. That's great, because this file is not a heavy file. So now we have this little guy. He's on quick save. He should be in our projects, in our recents, and he's right there because it's something that we're working on. So if you want to come back to him, he's just there, which is good. So now that this guy is here, and you've seen how he works, we are going to grab some of the other tools. So let's hide his, actually let's leave that halo there. Let's go over the most used tools that I use when I'm sculpting. A lot of these, when I don't know where they are, I use my keyboard. So let's say I want to find the move tool. I don't know where the move tool is. I press M, and then I can see the move tools, either this one, there's another one, but I like to use this one. See, there's V for this move tool. So you could do MV and it'll pick it, or M and then T, and I've picked the topology. So I don't usually remember all these, which is okay. There's a lot of these to remember, so you can go back to move tool. So just do move, you think M, and then you like the topology one, you press T. You just want the regular move, you press V, and then it moves it to that. So you can see how that brush is now just a move brush. Let's go back to MT. Oops. Do not switch. So let's go back to M and then T, and then it moves back to move topology. So back to the demo head here. This is also pretty important, so I want to kind of hammer this one in too. Here you see there's a circle within a circle. So what does that circle mean? That circle is the size of your brush. We haven't gone over this just yet. Usually I leave focal shift alone. So come up here on the top, see them all up here. And then this is a lot like your art program. Focal shift, I usually leave it in 0 because it's kind of like in the middle. And then your draw size, right there, you can make it bigger or smaller. So just think it's a brush. This is a brush. The intensity of your brush is right there. I usually don't mess with this. I just mess with this intensity. So if you really want this to move stuff like a lot, then you can bump the intensity up or a lot less. So we're going back over here in the model. So it's a circle and a circle, but you only have one red dot. So what happens when I try to move topology with one red dot? Go like that. He's got like some random horn, but it didn't move over here. So what happened? Immediately when you have transferred a file in, be it one that you've made on this program, another program, just one of like the start files from Lightbox, it's not going to know immediately that you want to duplicate, you want to mirror both sides. It doesn't know that. It doesn't know what you want to do, so you have to tell it what to do. So as always, remember Control Z erases things, which is important to know. If you know your art programs, Control Z is your friend. It is delete. When you're in here, this is how I always check. I just kind of go like that, and I see that there's only one dot. But I want to give him horns on both sides. So I'm going to press X. And now he's got 2 dots. So it knows that if you put it in the middle, mostly in the middle here, the dot follows a 1 dot thing. Look at the line, and it's in the middle. If you deviate from that line, it turns into 2. Because it wants to mirror what you're doing on the other side. So now I want to give him horns that we pull out. And all of a sudden, he's got these horrendous horns. But they're mirrored. And that's how you do mirrored sculpting. Just make sure that you press X before you do anything on your sphere or just your already made character and whatnot. So, see, he can look real beautiful like that. There goes, add more. So that is just moving topology. You're not doing anything crazy. You just grab that brush that looks like this, and it's called Move Topology. And if you make that brush big, it just moves things a lot more. So it's just kind of grabbing stuff. If you make it real small, then when you pull on stuff, it's tiny. See, and it happens on both sides. But let's say this character had a backstory and you just want that one scar on his face. So we're going to turn off the mirror topology. We're going to go up into your brushes because you want to give this guy that scar. There is a brush that I use to like cut into stuff, and it's called a dam standard. I know it's a weird name, but that's what it is. It's dam standard. It's this one. You use it to rake in details. So you click on it. See how it looks like it's been raked? And then we're going to go into his eye and we're going to give this character a backstory. And then we're going to kind of cut into his eye. And then just, there you go. Oh, he's so sad. But see that it did not pass it over to the other side. So you can add details on one side and then go back, press X, and continue working. And you're like, oh, I want some lines or something. Just, I want to add just random things here and there. Like, oh, I want a line here and here and here and here. And then you can continue doing stuff that is mirrored. And then you can have some aspects like the scar just be on one side of the face, which it helps. So that's a good one to know. So there's a couple more brushes that I want to go over here. So the dam standard, I use it a lot, especially to cut into smile lines. So, I mean, this guy is not a suit, but say if I wanted to, there you go. You can cut into his smile line there. But it's great for like little details, like the little creasing that he has around the eyelids and stuff. You could do a lot of that with the dam standard, and same thing with like the ears and whatnot. So that is one of the other brushes that I use a lot. And you can see some of the brushes that I use very often. Clay is kind of like the generic one that you have, and it just kind of builds up clay. But I never use just clay. I think the clay one's kind of a weak brush in my opinion. So I like to use clay buildup instead. So clay buildup, if you look at it, it's a weird ball with like square bits to build up stuff. But it works out really, really nice. So you'll see me building up a lot of areas with clay buildup. And it's literally what it means. You're just layering clay. But let's say you're like, well, I just built up this area, but man, this looks chunky. Don't like the way this looks so gross. You press shift button. So I'm going to press shift and check out this area where you can see the clay buildup brush on the left. I'm going to press shift and it changes to smooth. And my circle right here changes to blue. That is my smooth brush instead. So see, without shift, regular clay buildup, I build away and I'm like, yay, that's cool. And then I press shift and I go over stuff while I'm clicking on shift and using my brush and I'm smoothing areas. And then all of a sudden, that's been smooth. So smooth brush is something I use a lot. So you'll have your main brush and then you go back and forth, like smooth, back to this, back to clay buildup, and you're like, oh, more clay buildup, more clay. Oh man, that'd go back to smooth because you want to, smooth some areas. And of course, when you click on shift, look at the intensity up here, it changes. So it's really high at 100%. I'm clicking shift, I'm going to lower it anyways. Let's say you do 25. And like, let's smooth this area a little bit. So it's not as intense as the way it was doing it here. And of course, if you have a tablet, it will go off of the pressure that the tablet has. So the harder you press, the more intensity and all that, which actually helps a lot. It just saves some time. So clay buildup, another one of my favorites. Flatten. I love this brush if you want to get really sharp areas. So I can tell that this nose was done with some of the flattened brush, so you can get that area. Some of the areas here, the way his brow was built up was with flatten. So I could say if I wanted to flatten the area, come in here and I flatten, flatten, flatten. So I'm going to switch over to my tablet so I have a little bit more control with it. So let's say I wanted to flatten this area, and you can kind of see the brush working there. So you can tell that if he was flattened here before, it was chiseled. Let's make him more. Let's flatten the edges. So this one's more of just like, personal preference, what you're going to use flatten for it, but flatten is an amazing brush, and I definitely recommend it. So that is one of those brushes that, I use quite a bit. And based on how much you push, it's how strong it is. So flatten is another brush. Not the parts one, but because I clicked on the parts one, we're going to go and check this one out anyways. So anytime that you click on a brush that you use a lot, it likes to go up here, or it's one of the latest brushes that you clicked on. Because we clicked on parts, let's go back to parts. So this works as a brush. It's weird because once it works as a brush, you'll see, it's odd. You can't just, move it around this easily. So let's say he's gonna, have a hand sprout out. Oh, but that's the thing too. If there's many subdivisions, you can't do this. So I will have to do something else. Sometimes some brushes will give you a heads up like, hey, if you have too many subdivisions, because it's there's too many details, like, let me put it back over here. If it's too detailed, it just won't allow it, which is fine. So we can make it on something that is not detailed and add all these parts. So that brush will have to be later, and that's so I don't confuse you either. So ignore the parts one for now. So inflate tool is another one that I use often. Let's say we want to give him a bigger nose, like a clown nose. And there you go. That intensity was at 10%, but this brush can get out of control pretty quick. So smooth that a little bit there. He's all lumpy. So inflate brush right there, inflat. Masking, that I'll show you that later. The standard brush just always comes along the ride anyways. I barely use this one because I mostly use the clay buildup, but this is good for, you know, building up as well. It just depends on what you want to do with it. So if we recap on the brushes that I use the most, it would be clay buildup, dam standard, flatten, inflate, move topology, smooth always pops up for any brush as long as you click on shift, and then transpose or transpose smart. They're very similar. You can use just those and get away with most of the sculpting that I do. And that's about it on that stuff. All these other brushes are, you can play with them. They're all odd brushes. There's a lot of stuff you can do with these. So that is pretty much like the basics of this and how to use this. I'm going to go over a couple other little things here as well. But let's say you love this thing that you made because this thing is scary. But you want to take it into another program. You want to save it, but you've been hitting quick save. You're like, oh my goodness, this demon angel guy, I've been saving him. But I want to go, 3D print this guy. I need to export him out of here as an OBJ file. So how do you do this? Well, currently, he is in 1, 2, and 3 files. To export anything as a one piece, you're going to have to grab this, and then you're going to have to merge down and join all the parts. I usually do this at the end. I save this as 2 files. I save one file that has all my parts completely separate, and then I save a flattened file. So pretty much the same if you've done artwork. I always save the one that's like my PSD file that has all my layers, my info, everything, and then I save the file that I'm going to post online, which is my JPEG. So this is how I would consider that. Consider it like a JPEG in a way. So let's say we want to export this guy. So we're going to go back into the subtool level right there, and you're going to merge down, and it's going to ask you press OK. Oops. But you got to do it with your mouse, and then merge down. It gives you a heads up like, hey, you can't undo it. That's it. So now he's one piece. The whole thing is like one layer. He's got intersecting geometry, all that stuff. That's not good, but we can take care of that later. So now this is a one piece character. The halo is connected to this. Everything's connected together. So we want to take this guy, and let's say we want to 3D print him, do whatever, work with him in another program. You can export him right here. So see the top part where it says tool, and then you have your info right here. There's this load tool, save as, all this good stuff. So you can save it as, before I joined it all together, you could have saved it as something, but I usually do quick save, saves it as that. But you can export it, so export, and then that says demo head. I'm going to put it on desktop, and it's going to be an OBJ, but you can save it as a bunch of different things. I usually like it as an OBJ because that's what everything reads, or an STL, but I usually do OBJ, and then you just click save. So we save this guy, we're like, all right, we're good to go. There we go. And since I have a bunch of just junk out here, there he is. Then you can double click on it, and there he is. So this guy, oh my goodness, he looks so scary. He is a one piece ready to print thing. I mean, you would have to pass it, of course, through like Mesh Mixer, get him ready to go, all that good stuff. But he's been exported. That is your OBJ file, this beautiful man with his scar and everything. So I usually take them into, this is just a reader from Microsoft that reads OBJ files. And then this way you can kind of check your stuff if you want, make sure everything imported together. And this is pretty much what I do with all of mine. So go back in here. So that one is, so you have like, save as tool if you want to save it as something else. That's usually you save it as a Zbrush file. Because remember, like when you have Photoshop, you save it as a PSD. It doesn't mean every program is going to be able to read PSD. ZBrush files are only read through ZBrush, but the ZBrush file will have more information than let's say an OBJ file, because that's kind of more of like, consider that almost like as your JPEG, your flattened down version with all the info kind of just merged together. So I don't want to go super in depth into all this stuff, but we're going to go over the parts that I use the most. So the subtool, again, going back into subtool, you can click on it, you can close it. There's a lot of stuff down here, a lot of stuff. So this can get pretty scary if you have no idea what you're doing. So the ones that I use the most would be, again, subtool, because this is where your information is for your layers. My geometry tool, this one is very important. So in here we can do a couple of things. So the word divide means that all the information that's on this, we can keep dividing these little lines into more smaller lines, smaller. It's technically triangles, and you're making more triangles. And the more you make, the more information, and then the smoother the character will be, and you can get some insane detail, and you can start, you know, getting rid of some of these jaggedy edges. So I'll show you. So if I click divide, it made them a lot smoother. That's because I've given the file more information to work with. So immediately I have so much information to work with that I can, when I go in and I want to add, you know, more stuff, there's even more stuff to work with, so it'll be a lot smoother. And you can keep clicking divide. Just be very careful, because the more information you have, the harder it is on the computer. And if you don't have a computer that can run this, it will die on you. Save often. That is the one thing that I will try to hammer into everybody's heads. Save as much as you possibly can. You will be happy that you did. So, especially with that nice little quick save button right up there, there is no excuse not to save, because sometimes your computer just crashes by accident. So that's the thing. Be careful with that divide button, and it's in smart mode pretty much, like our smooth modifier. It will continue. So if I click divide again, see, it got like smoother, but it's going to get, you know, thicker and thicker and thicker in the information. So we're going to go, I'm going to show you this with a sphere, because it makes more sense with a sphere. Let's open up a project. We're not going to save him because I don't like him. So let's do this again. So we have a little sphere here, and let's pull something out. I'm gonna pull, so let's say we are running out of info, because every time I pull, it's kinda, you know, it's already getting a little jaggedy, even though this one, when spheres start out, they have a lot of lines already, so you can do a lot of pulling, and it's fine. Like, so we can smooth that a little bit there. But when I'm starting with like really basic stuff, oh, it looks kind of like a flipper. Huh. There you go. When I'm starting really basic, I usually go in here into geometry. And then I don't divide. I don't hit clay polish, because clay polish will make it real soft. I go to Z Remesher. So Z Remesher is something that is specific to ZBrush, the full version. I'm pretty sure this is one of those things that is specific to this program only. It will remesh things, especially after you've been, you know, doing some weird stuff and moving things around. And then I usually do half when I'm starting with these spheres, and I keep lowering them and lowering them. So I do Z Remesher at half, and it's going to lower the information because I like to work with low information first and then divide it multiple times, like so I can add more information as I want more information. It's kind of like start with something basic before you start with something that has so much information, because then you're going to be moving a lot of points together and it's going to be messy, and it's just pretty much like start with as basic as you can before you go into full detail. It's pretty much like start with a sketch before you start, you know, coloring it, because you want to do everything step by step. So I usually do Z remesher and I do half, and then I usually do it again and see how the sphere is changing, and you're starting to see those squares a lot more. And then do it again, and you can really see them now. So when you're working on it like this, your computer moves pretty quick too, because you are moving a lot less information all at once. And it's okay if it's not, you know, right now I'm just using the move topology. It's okay if it's not super polished and clean, because consider this a rough draft. You are working with like your sketchy version before you're going to color it in. So just move it around and everything. But let's say we wanted to, I don't know, it has a spike at the end over here. You're like, man, I just want to pull this spike out. And you're like, oh, look at that. But all of a sudden, I can see that I am running out of information. Look how sharp that is. There's just not enough info, and maybe in CS starting to do some funky stuff there. So we want to remesh this, but I want to see if it'll fix it. So I want to do double because I want it to go up in information and try to fix this area so it's not so sharp. Let's have Z remesher. And see, it's already made it a little bit cleaner. Instead of just a sharp object, it started adding a bit more information there. But then let's say all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I want this really, really nice and clean so I can really start going in there and adding details. You can go up here and click divide, and then it gives you a bunch more info. And then you can do it again and give you more info. So all of a sudden your mesh is dense. It's really dense. You can see your poly counts up here, and they've jumped up a lot. So now when you do this, your spikes are a whole lot cleaner. So it's one of those things that you have to figure out when you think it is right to start with adding so much detail. Because if you add so much detail at the beginning, you can bog your computer down. It's just a messy workflow. It's pretty much like sketching, inking, and coloring one side of the piece of paper, like one side of the artwork, before you finish sketching like the rest of the body. And then it just doesn't make any sense. It's just messy. It's a messy workflow. So start off with basic and then slowly start to build up. So that's in here. That's in geometry. So if you forget where it is, just think geometry, because you are altering the geometry of the object that you are working with. And then to make it smaller, you can of course stop it right there. So let's start up again with light box. Let's do another sphere. No, I don't want to save it. So let's go back to the sphere here. So let's say we want two spheres. We don't want just one. And we want to mirror them. So let's say this sphere here has, we'll just do, it's got two little spikes, and let's cut into it. This is the other thing to know. If you press Alt on any brush, it'll do the opposite. So clay buildup, if you press Alt, instead of building, let's say out, let's say like that, let's press Alt, it'll cut inwards. And this is really good to know for a lot of brushes. So if you just leave the brush doing its normal thing, it'll just do that. And then if you press Alt, it'll cut in. So let's say you want two of this cat face thing. Like, well, how am I going to mirror this? You have your subtool, so your polysphere is right there. It's like, oh, look, it's this little guy. Well, we want 2 of these. So using your mouse and right here in this middle gray area, you can scroll. So you keep scrolling and scrolling. And you're going to go to a place called deformation. So you open this and it's a mess. It's like, what is all this? Usually the one that I use the most is mirror. So this is great. Like, let's say you have 1/2 side area only. You can use mirror and then it'll give you the other side. But. We are going to do this actually. Let me do this first because this will make more sense. Let's rotate this guy. Not like that. Make sure I press X so he's not doing that. So it's going to be like this. And then I'm going to, because I want to duplicate him. I want to mirror him. I want to duplicate him first. So I have him, but I don't want him facing, let's say I didn't want him facing that way. Usually this is what I do for ears. So I could just go down here into deformation, and then I would just hit mirror, and it would literally just mirror the thing. Now they're just giving each other kisses. But I usually do that where I duplicate the polysphere or whatever it is that I'm using. I usually do it for ears. So if I make one ear on one side, you want to duplicate it on the other side. So it's tilted. It's, it has all the information that this one does over on this side. So that is pretty much what I use for the deformation, like right there. I don't touch these too much. Those you can touch later, but this is like the really basic one. I'm just using it to mirror. And yeah, this is like the basics of stuff I'm trying to go over. There's another thing that I wanted to point out. So let's say you have this guy here, but you wanted to import something. Usually, if you're going to import a file, I usually click on, let's say this, actually let me make a new one so it doesn't get confusing. So we got these 2 guys giving each other kisses there, so we're going to insert, let's insert a sphere. But this sphere, I actually going to click on it, and then I'm going to import, and then let's import ear smooth, right? And that sphere becomes this ear. So just make sure that when you want to import something, you have like a sphere or a cube, something that's there, and then when you import it, it replaces it. So it doesn't think you're importing a brush. Because a lot of times it'll think you're importing a brush and it just gets all bonkers with you. You can go in here, and that's in the middle of the way. So you can, move this, resize it, move it out of the way. And actually this is going to be good to show you about the ears. So let's do the ears again. So let's erase this man. And let's erase him as well. That's fine. And we just have this ear. So let's duplicate that ear. And we're going to use the transpose. Doesn't matter which transpose you use. Oops. Make sure that they're both visible. But you can tell that both ears are facing the same way, but you want to mirror this. So you pick the one that you want to mirror. And then you go, remember, all the way down to geometry. Not geometry, to deformation. And then you go up to the top and you do mirror. And now, ears are facing the right way. So this way you only have to worry about, making one. So you've made one horn, you've made one ear, and even if you wanted, you had sculpted half a head somewhere, you could always bring in here and then, you know, make a duplicate of that side and then mirror it. Let's see. So that's the really basic way of doing stuff in ZBrush, like for the tools and such. So I'm going to leave it at that on this. This is pretty much like the basics of the tools. Going over, again, Lightbox is what opens up your projects, where your projects live. Your recent projects that you've been, you know, hitting quick save. Remember, saving often is key. Please do that a lot. Then where your brushes live, which is right here on your left on the top. This is the most important part. Make sure you close Lightbox so it's not in the way. And then remember, if you forget where they are exactly, like move or damn standard and such, you just pick the letter where you think it starts with, and then you can find it a lot easier. If not, I mean, you'll start to remember where they are, so it's a lot easier to find them. The one thing I do recommend with ZBrush is to have a keyboard, because Control Z, which is for deleting, to go back, your undo, is very important. So have a keyboard, have a mouse, and have a tablet. So it's good to have like a combination of these things. So there's the brushes. Right here, your material, remember, is to change the colors of your material. I happen to like red. You can work with whichever one you want. Remember that this whole area up here is to go back on your history. If you go back or you go forward. The longer your history, the more dots this line will have. It's great, but just remember, quick save it. If you happen to have a computer that may not be able to handle it as much. Remember that your draw size is the size of your brush. So you can see it right there. And then your intensity to control that. Your camera, which is like your little guy. Your silhouette, so you can always check if everything looks good. To make it large or small, I just grab the middle and then I click, the corner, and I click and drag, make it small. Look at that. Your buttons on the side are what controls what you see. So like say frame, and it puts it into frame. Zoom in and out. Rotate from here, but you can also click on the outside and rotate with your mouse. Remember, I'm just clicking with my left hand, my right hand, using the left mouse button and dragging around. Look at that, you can control it. Then your line fill, I'm not sure why it's not showing my line fill right now, but usually that shows it. I think I probably clicked on something here and I didn't notice it. And then again, you can save as, especially if you haven't saved your project, you can save it as something that is a ZBrush file name. You can export. Again, like I had shown you, export it and then just double click on the file. If it's an OBJ, if you have a Windows computer, it'll show you the generic Windows viewer for your OBJ files. Your subtools are your layers, always here. Think about them as layers. That subtools are your layers. Your geometry is going to be where you do something like Z-remesher, so you can start off with basic information and build up. And then of course you can cut it down, and then you can go again into deformation if you want to mirror an object, which is, I'm just going to cover that part, just mirror that part. We're not going to go everything else at the moment. And that is pretty much like the basics of doing this. So hopefully this first video made sense. It was informative. If you have any questions whatsoever, be sure to ask me either through the chat right now, if you're in there at the moment, or you can ask me on Telegram or ask me on Patreon, because this will be posted up even after the stream is done, and you can go in and look at it and kind of get an idea. And then that way you can learn along with me. So what I plan on doing for the next one, because this is just the basics of kind of figuring out where everything sort of is, well, everything that is basic. Because there are so many brushes, so many buttons, so many things. As you can see, there is a huge list of things here on the side. it's very scary when you jump into this program and you have no clue what you're doing. But when you find out what works for you, and especially because the way that I'm going to show you how this program works would be to create parts that you can print, parts for suits, pretty much things that you can put to work. I'm not here to teach you how to animate and how to create characters for movies or games or anything like that. I'm teaching you from a maker standpoint on things that would make the most sense to you. So I'm keeping it very basic, very easy to follow along. So next time that I do another video on something like this, we are going to make a nose together. So if you want to kind of follow along, and I can show you the main brushes that I use on how to make a nose, and everything I do like step by step to create a nose. And then after that, I can start showing you, probably in another video so I don't put them all together, how to prep it for print and everything that I take into account for that. So oops, as it goes into preview. So thank you again for watching, and I hope everybody has a fantastic night, and I hope this was fun. So I will see you guys probably next week, since this weekend I'm going to be taking a break. So thank you.